The U.S. President Donald Trump says there are no talks that are taking place with Iran, and none are currently scheduled. This appears to put the brakes on diplomatic efforts to try and end the war, while dramatically escalating Trump's rhetoric over the Strait of Hormuz. He has said the United States has control of the strategically vital waterway, suggesting that Washington could keep that control permanently. He has even posted a map describing the Strait of Hormuz as, quote-unquote, new U.S. territory. Iran has long rejected the U.S. president's claim, saying the waterway would remain closed until the terms of the now expired interim agreement were met by the United States.
Our current focus is on this issue, the return to what was mentioned in the Memorandum of Understanding and resuming negotiations between the two parties, U.S. and Iran. These efforts are ongoing, of course, but as you know, we are also awaiting an agreement between the sisterly Sultanate of Oman and Iran regarding the Strait of Hormuz, which will, as we said, enable us to return to the framework of negotiations. The trajectory of events we would like to see in Qatar is an agreement on the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which would coincide with the resumption of the ceasefire and the resumption of the talks. Are these parallel lines converging or diverging? It's not very systematic on our end, but what I would say is that the agreement over the Strait of Hormuz would make it much easier for us to resume the talks between the United States and Iran.
So let's get you more reporting then with our New York-based U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease picking up that reporting. So Sherwin, while that back and forth and toing and froing and haggling about who controls the Strait of Hormuz and what the implications of that are, we're starting to get a glimpse of the toll that has been taken. New reporting from the New York Times today telling us about 17 sailors on commercial vessels having been killed in 65 attacks in and around that waterway since March. What more are we gleaning?
I think the New York Times reporting to us really amplifies the costs that happen in war as it pertains to civilians. Here you have 17 sailors that they are confirming have been killed on commercial vessels, not military frigates, not aircraft carriers, on commercial vessels trying to transport goods in and out of the Strait of Hormuz that has either been mined by Iran or has a naval blockade that has been implemented and instituted by the United States, but confirming 17 commercial sailors have been killed in Iranian and Omani waters since the beginning of this war around March. The vital waterway, what it says, based on that reporting, is that it's extremely dangerous for some of these ships to make that, that passage through those waters. Some have turned off their transponders, so you don't know exactly how many ships are managing to get through the naval blockade, or maybe through the assistance of the United States. But you're also, you understand the fuller picture here that before the war started, 130 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz every day. Now the average, based on what you have in terms of transponders that are on, is an average of 12 ships per day. So when you look at the oil price that is hovering at around $91 a barrel, before the war started, it was around $72 a barrel. That has been edging up. And as diplomacy goes here or doesn't go here, so is it reflected in the Brent crude oil price. And of course, the hill that both of these countries, the United States and Iran, are seeking to die on is control over the Strait of Hormuz. This is what Iran's chief negotiator, Iran's parliamentary speaker, Mohammad Baghdad Ghalibaf, and U.S. President Donald Trump said in the last 24 hours. Watch.
و روشن بگویم تا زمانی که تعهدات آمریکا در تفاهم نامه از جمله
Let me make it clear, until America implements its commitments under the Memorandum of Understanding, including lifting the blockade on the release of frozen assets, lifting the oil sanctions, ending threats and military operations on all fronts, and other conditions that America has agreed to under the understanding, the strait will not be reopened.
Well, they want to make a deal, but they're not going to make the kind of a deal that I feel is necessary. Look, we're in there for one reason. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. You understand that? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have a nuclear weapon. And right now, them building one after what we did previously with the B-2 bombers, going to be a long time behalf. But Iran cannot have. It's very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
And so this fight over the Strait of Hormuz is obfuscating the larger intractable issues that were meant to be negotiated under the 2-month process known as this Memorandum of Understanding that has, of course, expired yesterday. And so you're not dealing with issues related to Iran's nuclear program. You're not dealing with its ballistic weapons program, what to do with its enriched uranium, and what to do with the Iranian proxies in the region. And so the stalemate is about the Strait of Hormuz. And the question is, which side is going to blink first?
Yeah, exactly, Sherwin. Pick up on that point. So against that backdrop of that stalemate, in the absence of direct talks on broader issues, including Iran's nuclear program, and we are also witnessing, of course, the entrenched positions crystallizing over the Strait of Hormuz, as you've just reported. The question is exactly that: who blinks first, given the economic costs that is worsening for both sides?
Well, the U.S. president, for example, says there's no talks. This is on social media today, on Truth Social. The naval blockade remains in full force and effect. The Hormuz Strait is open and operating. That is what the U.S. President Donald Trump said on social media. The Iranians, according to the Reuters news agency, quoting a senior Iranian official, is saying this: Iran would shift to a fully offensive military posture because efforts to negotiate the permanent end to the war with the United States has stalled. So Iran is saying that they can go on the offensive here, given whatever military capacity they have left. And of course, the United States has already been on record, whether it be Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, or the President himself, talking about how they're locked and loaded and ready to go were there to be a military escalation. So as much as these talks are stalled, as much as the mediators, Pakistan, Qatar, and Oman, are working behind the scenes, we are on a cliff edge here in terms of what could ignite a real military escalation between these two sides, given the economic strain that is being imposed here, including through the naval blockade, but also the economic sanctions and additional sanctions package that has been prefaced here by the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. That is imminent. It could come anytime this week. So the pressure is very acute. I told you yesterday, Iran's inflation in July was about 88%. So things are very tough economically for Iran, despite the narrative and the posture they seek to put out there.
Always nuanced, always context-rich. That's the reporting there. Signature reporting of Sherwin Bryce-Pease, live for us from New York. Thank you, brother, for that update.